Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion are simple: to highlight the incredible nonprofits that make our communities stronger. Each episode is a chance for these organizations to tell their story in their words, sharing not just what they do, but why it matters to the people they serve, to their supporters, and to all of us who believe in the power of community. Through podcasting, we hope to amplify their voices, inspire connection, and give them one more tool to impact the hearts of donors, partners, and neighbors alike. This work is made possible through the generous support of our incredible partners: Cap Trust, offering fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations; Western Health Advantage, a local not-for-profit health plan that believes healthcare is more than coverage. It's about caring. CORE, executive leadership and comprehensive support services. They work in it so you can work on it. And Five Star Bank, a local, trusted advisor to community nonprofits for over 25 years. The Sacramento Metro Chamber has been shaping the business community in our region for more than 130 years. But what that role looks like today is very different from what it was even a decade ago. In this episode, I sit down with Robert Heidt, President and CEO of the Sacramento Metro Chamber, to talk about how the Chamber is evolving to meet the needs of a modern business community that spans 6 counties and 22 cities across the capital region. We talk about the power of convening leaders, the role of advocacy through programs like Cap to Cap, the importance of collaboration with organizations across the region, and why storytelling and relationships still sit at the heart of economic growth. Robert shares what it really takes to lead an organization that serves nearly 2,000 businesses, why chambers of commerce still matter, and how the Sacramento region can continue to grow stronger when business, government, and community partners work together. If you've ever wondered how the Metro Chamber fits into the broader ecosystem of Sacramento's economic future and why the growth trajectory has been so positive, this conversation gives you a clear and thoughtful look behind the scenes to answer those questions. Robert Heidt, welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network.
Thank you, Jeff.
This has not been an easy accomplishment to get you in here. You have been running 100 miles an hour since you arrived a little over 2 years ago to run the Sacramento Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. And what a job you've done. I cannot wait to get into this conversation. But for those who aren't familiar, could you give us the 30,000-foot view of the Chamber? You know, who it is, who it serves, and why it exists.
Absolutely. So as you know, Jeff, the Chamber is 131 years in existence this year. We serve 6 counties and 22 cities here in the capital region. And, you know, the Chamber industry has evolved greatly, you know, over the last 100 years of what the Chamber was to what we've become, because innovation and evolution is a part of every industry, every business, and the Chamber is no different. You know, the Chamber is really designed to foster a strong local economy, to make sure that we're advocating for business, championing those issues that make the great quality of life that we all come to know, for a great community to live, work, play, invest in. So the Chamber comes in many different shapes and forms to different people, but ultimately, I think it's one of the best business decisions that anyone can make an investment in.
Well, and what I like, we're going to get into some of those specifics of what that investment provides. 131 years is amazing, because when you think about that, that literally is coming out of the industrial
It's incredible.
part of the country's economy into technology and where we are today with AI. What are some of the pivotal moments that you've seen in Chamber history, knowing you've only been here for a couple of years, but you've probably gotten a lot of information having been involved in seeing the business leaders in the community talk about their relationship to both the Chamber and its economic force in the community?
You know, for me, because I've served multiple chambers, you know, it brings a fresh perspective and a different lens to how I view this. You know, I'm a veteran in this industry. You know, shortly after I got here, a few folks said to me, "Oh, well, great, nice to meet you. What do you do next? What are you going to do next?" And I'm like, "No, this is what I do. I'm a chamber nerd, right? Like, I'm a chamber guy. This is what I do."
And from a bigger market, Phoenix, for those who don't know.
Phoenix. I was in Austin, just outside of Boston, and Vegas. And so what's interesting is, I think in the chamber industry, like you talk about the evolution and innovation. When I first started in the chamber, to get invitations out to attend our programs and events, it was through our fax machine. And fax machines at that time were not able to memorize numbers. So it was a lot of boop, 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 and, send a fax and you wait for it to go through and you send the next and you sort of hope for the best. So we as an industry have evolved. What fascinates me is how community leaders, young professionals, entrepreneurs, innovators who are engaged in a chamber of commerce can tell the story of how they started off and they sort of weave their way through and then they sort of blossom. And they credit a lot of that through the chamber network because we don't have all the answers. We're not the expert in every facet of commerce and business, but we're connected to. So I believe that we're a strong conduit to what needs to happen in a marketplace.
It's funny that you mentioned faxes because I remember the day we got a fax at one of the radio stations here. When we got our first one, it's like we all stared at it, waiting for it, something to come through it. And it did. And then a week later, the paper, there was nothing on it. If you recall, those first papers were thermal type papers. And if it got sun or light on it, the messaging was all gone. And it was such a neat piece of technology that I'm sure a lot of the people listening today have no relationship whatsoever to. But for those of us who do, and it's funny that the technology is what's changed. It's the messaging that's still the same. The
Absolutely.
messaging is what's important. It's not how we get it. And we went from that fax piece of paper or to text to now what is some sort of an app or a cloud-based service.
And I think you make a good point about the messaging and what we represent still remains the same. As an industry for a long time, I think chambers across the nation and Italian USA may have taken for granted a little bit because it was ingrained in the DNA that you should belong. You should belong to your local chamber. You should be a part of Rotary. You should be part of Kiwanis or Optimus, all those different organizations that are community-based, service-based, giving back. And not that that doesn't happen today, but we also have to think differently of how people prioritize their time, their investment, and sort of that loyalty to organizations like us or others. And so we really have to craft our messaging a little bit differently to tell the story. And so that's one of the things that's more challenging for us because we're so busy every day and we go from one thing to the next that telling our story is something that we sort of suck at, and we have to do a better job at reminding people what the chamber represents and the value it brings. Because even if you're a non-member of the organization, you benefit from the work of the collective good.
And it's interesting you say that the storytelling part of it, because this is all about storytelling.
100%.
And you could go back 3 or 4 years ago, it was, but it wasn't called that. Now everybody is using that vernacular. That's the language. It's about storytelling. And storytelling is everything. Then it's getting it heard and seen. So it's one thing, you have great stories. Then what? How do you get it out there? How do you perpetuate it?
And it's also what's in it for me.
Yes.
Right? How does this benefit me? So the messaging has to be unique. Because if you're talking to someone who is building a business and they're working out of their home-based office to someone that is running a major corporation, the conversations that we have need to be tailored to that individual, that unique industry segment. We have some universal language that we generally use. All organizations sort of have that, but that relationship-based approach is what makes us successful.
And there's a second part of that too that's really challenging is you have these generational gaps because you have seniors who may be 60, 70, 80 years old who are involved in the chamber speaking one language. And then you have the youngest entrepreneurs coming in at 25, 30, 35 years old speaking a complete different language, and you have to reach them differently, which gives you a complexity that's unique.
It is. And that's where I mentioned earlier, when you talk about people, in my last chamber, I was there a little over a decade. And I'll give you a quick story. There was a woman who worked in a credit union. who was a branch manager, and she was assigned as the chamber representative. And her name was Maria. And so she started getting involved, and she would come to programs and things. And she was a professional. She knew her industry inside and out, but it was intimidating to walk into the room of 75, 100, whatever that magical number was, of business professionals from industries. And she was maybe a little bit soft spoken, and she didn't know how to voice her thoughts and views. She did, but she wasn't comfortable in that. And I watched through her engagement of us through different committees, and ultimately she became a board chair. And now that I'm gone and I look back, she is thriving. And her words, not mine, she has essentially said things like, the chamber helped me become this. She was already the professional in the financial industry, but what we gave her was the platform and the conduit and the ability to lead, because leaders aren't born, right? People who are successful, they don't just, it's the community around them. I mean, there's brilliant people who come up with these masterful ideas, but in order to be seen as a leader in the region or in a community, that happens over time. And it doesn't happen because you have all success, because there's a lot of failures in there too,
Right.
that you sometimes don't talk about, but that is a part of growth.
And to your point, we hear so often, boy, it's an overnight success. Look at how fast they've grown. And then you start to realize, it's the last 2 years that you've seen of the business that's been struggling and scrambling and scrapping for 15 years, and they finally got it.
It's like that image when you see the iceberg and you see, the person there smiling, and then you don't see under the water, but the image shows the under the water and kind of gives that reminding us of like the challenges and the sleepless nights. And I think any entrepreneur, any business owner, you have to work in your business and on your business.
Yes.
And then when people have a family life and, sometimes they just want to, disconnect altogether, there is a lot that goes into that. And so we owe a lot to small business America, mid-business America, that puts our heart and soul every day into whatever product and service they offer.
Which is the majority of business in the country.
100%.
Let's talk a little bit about programs. You mentioned that with the Maria in Phoenix, I'm assuming, who grew through the programs, grew personally through those programs. She had her professional part down, but it was the personal growth. And I'm sure the connectivity to people and friends and people that built relationships as a result of the chamber programs that she attended. What are some of the programs that the chamber provides for businesses, generally speaking?
So for us, I'll kind of define it in two different ways. We have our signature programming, and then you're going to have kind of your member lineup of events and programs. And then our foundation has a number of programming opportunities as well. And so on our signature programs, we have our Cap to Cap, which is our advocacy program, where we will take leaders and community champions back to DC to advocate with one voice for 6 counties and 22 cities. No easy feat, because everyone's got their own, agenda. They've got their own priorities, and which we love. But we also know that if we're going to be effective in DC, we've got to sort of speak within one voice and prioritize what the ask is for the Sacramento region. So that's a unique program in itself. We have our study mission, which is where we will go to sort of a sister city, 75 to 100 people every year. And we want to study the ins and outs, learn the pros and cons. What are the parallels? What have they done to be successful? It also reinforces what we're doing well. So it's not necessarily to say that we're not leading, but it's another way for us to see what's happening. So that's a one that, again, it's a fact-finding journey.
And similar size cities, right?
Generally similar size cities.
Like in Austin or in Indianapolis.
Correct.
Okay.
So this year we'll be traveling to Detroit. So we're super excited about that city. And I think they've been a comeback kid, because they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And then what they have done for revitalization, I think is going to be a lesson to learn from. The other programs that we offer are our annual dinner business awards. I know you've been a guest there, and many people are familiar with that. And that's really our opportunity to put the spotlight on those regional partners and leaders that make this community thrive. We try to get a little story in there about what we're doing at the chamber, but the night really is about the recipients that are being honored. I'll switch gears over to our foundation. And our foundation is really designed currently today with the emphasis around the young professional and how we have an obligation as an organization and a region to help grow and nurture the young professionals because they are the leaders of tomorrow. They are who are going to be sitting in your and my seat at someday.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to do a good job at making sure that we keep that homegrown talent here. We also have our leadership program, which again is designed in that facet. And then one of the newest programs we brought in under our foundation is the Sacramento Speaker Series. When we have member events, those are really designed kind of that coffee connect. That's that networking side of thing. It used to be chambers were really well known for a lot of their networking events.
Mm-hmm.
I think chambers are really trying to define the what's in it for me when we're thinking about programming, because if you want to attend an event in this region, you can go 7 nights a week, every
Right.
day of every month. There's an event out there. We're really focusing on the strategic reason of why we're going to convene a group of partners, business leaders, entrepreneurs, what we want them to get out of this, what is the benefit to them, and why it matters.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit about kind of the different programming under our different programs that we have.
Whew. That's a lot.
Quite a bit.
and I want to compliment you on Cap to Cap, because that last few Cap to Caps, I have friends who have attended sold out events. We're talking almost 500 people you're carting to the Capitol, which is no small accomplishment. That's herding cats. I know a lot of these people, and that's crazy. It's got to be a massive logistical process.
Here's a couple things about that program. It is very common for chambers to go back to DC to advocate, because we've got to have our voice heard. And our elected officials will tell us, we need you at the table. We need to hear from you. We need to hear, what's happening. What if these decisions are made in DC, the cause and effect that occur. So for us to unify a region that you're here, you're a part of this community, 6 counties and 22 cities, right? They're all amazing in their own right. But we've got to go back with that one voice. Now, there are niche projects and niche things we're working on. We divide that group into 13 different policy teams. So that's a feat in itself, because what we want to do is we want to work within those teams to craft, and we have policy papers for each of those teams, so that we're speaking again with a unified voice around healthcare, around environment, around whatever public safety, whatever the issue may be, that we're focused, targeted. This chamber proudly takes the largest delegation of any chamber of commerce in the nation back to DC.
Thank you for that.
And
thank you for that. Pay attention to Sacramento country.
It really is, when you think about that. And it's not that, look, I am a chamber guy by heart, so I want to be the best. So it's not to say that other chambers out there aren't doing great work. It is, but that's a badge of honor for this region to carry. Also, administrations change, and within that change comes a lot of turbulence, uncertainty, shifting priorities. And so sometimes organizations like ours could go back sort of with a vengeance and angry and frustrated. We're in unique times. And so some people align with administration currently, some people don't. Sacramento is unique. And I think that's what makes us special, is because the people who are here, we have a lot of different creativity in terms of people and beliefs. And so we actually got complimented quite a bit when we were in DC this past year for our approach to going in with the new administration. Because if you don't align, sometimes you think, let's go in blazing, we're right, you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's not the approach. I think it's around education and us making sure that if they don't align with our views as a community and as a region, that we're sharing with them that, hey, when decisions like this happen, this is what it means to our constituents. This is what it means to the residents. This is what it means to our workforce. This is what it means to our environment. This is what it means to our transportation system. So we really find ourselves, going back to storytelling, we have to do a better job at educating our elected officials, those federal agencies, about why Sacramento's issues should be of importance in their decision-making process.
Because they influence so much. They influence so much. The largest state in the union, one of the most influential from an economic standpoint, for sure. And what we say has value. And you're right, that story has to be crafted properly for them to listen appropriately. And, knock on wood, we're making some headway there.
And what's also interesting is the program has changed greatly over the 50 plus years that we've gone back. Initially it was around, BRAC, base realignment committee,
Yes.
and the closure of bases on the horizon. And so that was the unifying voice back in 1970 around this. And so this program's long in existence. We're fortunate we maintain such strong relationships with our congressional representatives. And so, we see them here, and sometimes we hear the argument, well, why do you have to go back to DC to do the work? We need to be there so that their counterparts also see that they've got a strong business coalition behind them. But it's the federal agencies. But we took it a step further within some of the teams last year, where they were not just looking at having the conversations with our federal officials. They were looking at, okay, who serves on those committees that are making decisions? And do we need to spread it out a little bit further and sort of dive in to different conversations with other elected officials that are willing to take a meeting from outside of our region that are on a select committee making decisions? And so that approach, I think, could help to prove to be effective for us, again, in communicating what does this mean? Or have they talked to their community? Have they talked to their businesses? Have they talked to their residents to find out that if those decisions are made, this is what would happen? So I think that we are definitely a leader in this and the example for other communities to follow.
And congratulations on that. One of the other things that we hear too from that cap to cap, as you and I were speaking, it's not just the political side of it and the influence at the Capitol, it's what takes place afterwards. And you can say, we hear some of what takes place afterwards, but those relationships that get built and the conversations that get had that people just don't have the time when we're in our busy day-to-day in Sacramento. But when they're confined at a hotel or at a lobby of a restaurant or however it occurs, it's, hey, I've been wanting to talk to you for however long. Let's have that conversation. And that comes back and then it gets acted. We know these are the people who are making things happen in the community. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going.
You are so accurate. This is about regionalism. And, you think, we were just chatting before we went on air, but that, we are sometimes 20 minutes, an hour, 45 minutes apart from one another. This should just happen. And it does. But sometimes, again, the makeup is, it's about 100 or so each year, freshmen, so first-time attendees, 100 plus elected officials throughout the entirety of the region. And then the makeup of the balance is what we call the veterans. They've been a number of years, and there are people with a badge of honor like a Roy Brewer, who I think he has the longest tenured attendance in history of cap to cap. And there's many others. But, the idea is that when we're home, our calendar sometimes can be so demanding. And some of our elected officials and some of our business folks are going from thing to thing to thing. And the intentionality is there. We've got to get together. And I'm sure, like you, look at when we talked about first coming on this program, well, yeah, let's do it. And then it takes a little bit of time. And then all the best intentions happen. And then 6 months go by, a year go by. Cap to cap is one of those unique opportunities where you have sort of everyone captive. Nothing happens without working across, kind of boundaries and jurisdictions and the collaboration. So when folks are there together, there is something magical where conversations do happen. And then you sort of hold yourself accountable, like, we're going to do this when we get back home. But also deals happen outside of the advocacy. And we hear that over and over. Like, I was in there, and when we had that reception, I was finally able to connect with someone, because your guard is down a little bit. You're in a different frame of mind. We're away from home. And then you have a different type of conversation and you're building that relationship.
And I'm sure the study mission and Leadership Sacramento,
100%.
every one of those is the convening of people who are leaders in the community that are significant.
It speaks to the 3 C's of Chamber. We are a convener, and we are a champion, and we are a catalyst for business.
Love it.
So 3 C's and conveners, one of those top ones for us.
In terms of programs, I want to address one, because this is something you brought in. You actually bought the speaker series. And it's a little near and dear to my heart, because I used to run KFBK, and there was this thing called Perspectives, and we had this guy who was, Sacramento's darling, Rush Limbaugh, who came and he spoke and he hosted it, and that was a big deal. And then it was Tom Sullivan, and it was just a wonderful event. And this is a self-serving comment here. I remember being at one of the events. The first one was really kind of fun because I got to meet Sarah Palin, backstage with a conversation amongst a few people. But the other one was, there's this guy who just runs a station in Sacramento, and I'm sitting on a stool in the lobby of the convention center at the time, and I'm sitting with two other people, Bibi Netanyahu and Walter Cronkite. And I'm awed that it's just me. How did I end up with these two? And you know what the conversation was? Their tennis game. Not
Little did you know
kidding.
that's what it would be about, right?
I don't play tennis. I didn't have a lot to offer, but we had a little bit of the conversation. To this day, I don't have a photo of it. I would kill for that photo. Maybe in the archives somewhere, if somebody hears the Sacramento Bee has got to have a picture of that someplace. But I will never forget it. It was one of those days and one of those events, and so many of them had significance. And I see that with the speaker series today, where we have the ability to bring these incredible speakers into town that we would never have the opportunity or the wherewithal to do it. It has to come through an organization that serves the greater community in that way. So I'm pleased to see that it will be sustained through the chamber.
You know, what's interesting there, to comment on that just a little bit, is, Mitch has done a phenomenal job for the past 20 years with the speaker series. And shortly after I got here, I think it was month one, Dave Routon, who's the former CEO of Safe Credit Union, he's good champion of the chamber. He was the interim CEO until I got here. He's like, hey, Robert, I got this guy I know, because I'm new. I don't know many people. And he's like, Mitch, and he wants to talk about this. If you have an idea and thought, it was month one. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this could be phenomenal. I'm thinking, I've got 1,000,001 other priorities. I don't know how I'm going to figure this out. So long story short, it was about almost 2 years in the making until we made the acquisition. But really what the impetus is Carrie Thomas, who was our immediate past board chair of Sutter Health, had said, she sort of grew up in the chamber. So when you talk about people and personalize it, she can remember going to her first cap to cap as a youngster with her dad. And so there's another product of someone who's grown up within the chamber and benefited from what we do. She wanted, as she was becoming chair, to bring back perspectives. Now, what that looked like, I don't know that anyone had any exact idea, because what it looked like back when you knew as perspectives to where we are today, it's going to be a little bit different. So we were sort of figuring out, like, how do we bring this back? This was lingering in the background where Mitch wanted to, kind of get out of the speaker series. He's got a law firm, pistachio business, and maybe he wants to enjoy some time off. I don't know if he golfs, but, he wants to lessen his load. We talk and figuring this out. Ultimately, the conversation led into our acquisition of the speaker series. And so we've produced now the first 4, and it's been remarkable, really exhilarating, I think, for us as an organization to have that as one of our new signature programs, and really for the community. Who we've had in so far has been uniquely different in their own way, and we have another one coming up later this month. But what we want to do is we really want to transform speaker series into, and I think Mitch really liked the fact that it came over to the chamber and our foundation, because we have an ability to tap into the region, unlike maybe what he and his team did. They did a phenomenal job, but we have a larger sphere to connect into, to bring people in, because if we're going to bring these people in to Sacramento, we are losing an opportunity to connect people within the community or organizations and or the under kind of served communities that otherwise might not have an opportunity to come to something like this. I think as an organization, that's our job, is to figure out how to get them in the room to benefit from this. To sort of tie in the perspectives piece, we want to keep the element of what everyone knows with speaker series, but as we go into our contract negotiations, which we're in currently on speakers for the lineup next year, we're going to curate something special, which is sort of perspectives like. So when we're bringing in a big name, we will curate the opportunity to have him or her join us either the day before or the day after, where we're hosting another event for the most influential leaders around the region. And so it will have a sort of perspectives element, but not a full day. Maybe it's a afternoon, maybe it's a brunch, maybe it's a lunch, but the idea is to sort of connect that person and the perspective they bring to the region to the business community a little bit different than what we do the night of, because we don't want to take away from that, because that's a different tonality than what we want. So naturally, I believe our organization is right for the moment, and who benefits is the community.
Right. And what a great tease you just gave, because now we're all, what's that going to look like next year? I can't wait. I can't wait to see what that turns out to be. I cannot wait to return to hear more from Robert Heidt of the Sacramento Metro Chamber right after we hear from the businesses that help make this program possible.
I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. We're dedicated to supporting nonprofit organizations who advocate for the strength, resilience, and vitality of those they serve. When nonprofit organizations thrive, our community does too. By supporting the Nonprofit Podcast Network, Five Star Bank is amplifying the voices and meaningful impact of our nonprofit community. We're Five Star Bank, a trusted nonprofit partner. How can we help you?
We are really excited to be part of the family and contribute to the work that you all are doing. CORE provides fractional and interim executive services, along with comprehensive back office solutions that go into our client sites and do the work to give them the capacity they need in order to move through transitions, whether that's planned or unplanned. Or companies also work with our accounting and finance, back office solutions, human resources, technology, and administration. The reason why our back office solutions add value is because we save them time and money, anywhere from 20 to 30% of what they would spend on that back office solution. We work in it so they can actually work on it. CXORE.com and contact me directly at DTEAT@CXORE.com.
If you're interested in learning more about how CORE may help your organization, visit CXORE.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with Cap Trust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com. In the progression of questions here, we talked a lot about the programs. There are a lot of programs, and it's wonderful for the community to understand what those look like. Let's move on to collaboration, because you don't do this alone.
Absolutely
The chamber
not.
doesn't exist in a vacuum. And we have a lot of other organizations. We have other chambers. We've got the Roseville Chamber and the Rancho Cordova Chamber, some of the stronger chambers that we see now growing and getting a voice in the economic community. Greater Sacramento Economic Council, Valley Vision. Even some of those can be confusing with the Metro Chamber. How do you collaborate? Who do you collaborate with? What does that look like?
So you're right. Nothing happens alone. It comes, I think, from the culture and tonality that we set for ourselves as a chamber, through our board of directors, through all the volunteers, that, we are inclusive. And I'm a strong believer in, if we don't have room at the table, how do we make room at the table? How do we look at who's at the table today, who's missing, what perspectives aren't there? And that's the culture we have, where people feel welcomed, they belong, whether you are a sole proprietor or you're in a suit and tie running a major corporation every day. The collaboration with the other organizations is vital to the region's success, right? It benefits us, but it's not about us. It's about lifting Sacramento up to be the best it can be. And when I say Sacramento, I mean the greater region, because I don't want to leave out any of the other great communities. When you talk about the partnership with an organization like GSEC, sometimes people get us confused. And in some markets, we're one and the same. And if you're in a smaller market, it's sort of, a chamber / an EDC group that's sort of working collectively to try to drive their local economy. The work that Barry does over at GSEC and his team and their board is really about promoting all the assets that Sacramento has to offer. I've been at this a long time, and, they really have to cultivate relationships, and they call them site selectors. I really call them site eliminators, because when they're looking at moving projects, and we're not going to get huge projects every single day, right? We want to be strategic in what the region has to offer. But if their top 5 things are, we need, this type of location, this type of workforce. If we have 2 out of 3, it doesn't matter what city we're competing against. It makes it more challenging. We can still try to fight for it, but it still makes it more challenging. So as they attract those businesses into the region and show them this is what we've got, as they land here, it's our job as a chamber, sort of hand in glove, to integrate them in and help make them successful. Not that they're not successful in their own right, but just like me, a newcomer, right? I've been in the chamber world a long time, 2 years in. I needed the help of partners and collaboration to help integrate me in. We're doing the same thing at the chamber, and then you foster kind of the business retention expansion side of things. And that's where chambers excel, is that we need to work with partners and businesses to understand what it takes to get there. You mentioned, a Valley Vision. They're great at research. They're a think tank. They're helping to kind of pull together that data that helps to drive decisions, right? So we may not be the primary driver on data, but that's where our organization, Evan over at Valley Vision, Barry. I was actually just on a call yesterday and also James Corliss, because we had worked on a prior to my coming on board, the Prosperity Partnership. And as that sort of is coming into its final iteration of what that first phase was, the 4 of us are looking collectively to go, okay, it's up to us to figure out where we go from here. So we're meeting very, very regularly to figure out what does that look like for the region from the 30,000 foot level, because all 4 of those organizations, SACOG, GSEC, and Valley Vision, we are all regional. And so we're mindful of what happens in various pockets, but we have to look at the big picture and how to get this or the region moving in the right direction. When you talk about other chambers, look, I'm a chamber guy by heart. I would tell any business, belong to your local chamber. In fact, we had a local business that joined here in Citrus Heights, where you're located, and they were a little upset with us at first because our program and events didn't align with the days that worked for them. And, the instant thing to do in the industry might be like, oh, just leave them alone, try not to ruffle feathers. No, we're better than that as an industry, and we're better than that as peers. So what I did is I picked up the phone and called Sherry at the Citrus Heights Chamber and said, we have a business that joined us. It's not a good fit. Don't want to toss you someone that's, disgruntled. Would you like to have a conversation, and let's get their membership over to you? Because we're all independent. But at the same time, for me, it's not about just acquiring a member and saying, great, we have just another member, or it's another few dollars in the bank. It's about recognizing that the business joined sort of the mega chamber in the region, and it wasn't alignment. But if I can align them to the Citrus Heights Chamber, where they have a greater ability to make an impact locally, it will. Turns out, 100% success. They are
Wonderful.
100% happy. Sherry couldn't have been more happy. That's just one example. But when it comes to chamber collaboration, we have to work together. We want to work together. Retail crime was one where we worked together collectively as an industry. Many other examples, but if it comes to chamber, you will always hear me champion, support your local chamber. And even if that means they're not going to be a member of the Sacramento Metro Chamber, if they're a member of the Roseville Chamber or the Rancho Cordova Chamber or any talent chamber here, I'm all for it.
And what's great about that is a chamber member is best when they're engaged. And if they don't have the ability to engage, it's just a dues paying card. It doesn't mean anything. And they're not going to be happy. So compliments to you, because that doesn't happen often enough.
And engagement comes in different forms. Years ago, and this was an analogy we used, and when I was maybe a little younger, naiver in my chamber day, it was sort of that thing we joke about from the retention of membership and businesses, is that chamber's like a gym membership. If you don't use it, then nothing happens. And so you figure like, oh, okay, in the gym, if I don't go every day and I'm not looking big and buff, like there's no value to it. In my early days of chamber, we used that. And then as we moved along, it's like, we've got to stop saying that, because when you invest in an organization like ours, you may not see a one-to-one transactional return instantly. We're in it for the long game. We're in it for the regional advancement. It could take days, weeks, months, years in the making, that when you invest, we're putting those dollars to work, because it's member money, it's member invested money. And so what we're doing today may not pay off until a year from now. And so we need people to understand that, yes, some will have the transactional mindset, like, hey, I'm in the tchotchke business, and so I need to sell, my apparel or my, whatever that may be. And that's how I value chamber membership. When we understand that, we can speak the language, but we sort of remind them that, yes, the curation of what we do makes the propensity for you to have those sort of transactional sales much greater. Because when we grow business and we grow economy, your ability goes up. But we need you to invest in and not sort of value us based on a one-to-one return. Then you have those sort of transformational leaders who understand that they're investing. And that's some of those, sometimes the larger companies who they're not looking at us for networking or, to get their name out. We've got a lot of household names here in our region. So it's important that they're a part of that, but they're looking at us for growing the region, doing the strategic things, doing the advocacy work, the economic development work, the business developing of leaders. So they're looking at investment a little bit differently. So as we were talking earlier about telling the story, we've had to really refine how we talk about what we do to show that you're not just joining a chamber. It's not just a membership. You are choosing to invest in an organization that's going to work every day with that collective investment for the betterment of all.
I don't think you could say that any better, because that's exactly what it is. And so often we get caught up in what's a subscription. Oh, I have a subscription. Yeah, I belong. And then at some point you're like, why do I have that subscription? It's just I'm paying it every month for what reason, or every year for what reason. And eventually it goes away and then you don't see benefit. And it's not a good discussion in the community.
100%.
You want the opposite of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I get out of this benefit, this membership, these people, these programs, whatever that may be.
It's interesting. I tell people, think about today, the way we operate with our technology, cell phones. We don't call people anymore, right? Like it's almost sometimes when people call, you're like, why are they calling me, right? You're a little alarmed, like what, who, what?
Must be important.
Yeah, like what's going on here? So we're always focused on the work, and everyone's in the trenches on my team, right? I've got a great dynamic team. I can do a lot. I can't do anything without them.
Right.
So they're in the trenches working, and then the phone rings. And sometimes you could view it as like, oh my gosh, like if the phone rings one more time, it's a distraction. But I remind them that if someone's calling us, they have a need. So we have to flip the gear, because if you're in the zone or you're really laser focused on something, you got to help to take that call. You have to help them because they're not calling because they have nothing. Rarely do we get a call that says, hey, Robert, just calling to see how you're doing today. We'll welcome that call, but they're calling because they're on a page of their playbook that they realize the chamber could be the conduit to the answer, or could be the connector. And so, our team is challenged with that every single day. And no 2 days look the same. You don't know what calls are going to come into the chamber, right? And you don't know what issue someone has. And so we really want to present ourselves as an organization and industry as, listen, we're here for you. Your success is our success. And that sometimes is difficult to do because you get thrown a lot of curveballs. And so you're sort of like, wait, what? Now this, now that, and you're going in 1,000 directions. But it's important that we are seen as nimble, resourceful, and an advocate for everything that business represents.
And on the topic of membership, let's go into funding. How is the chamber funded? I mean, clearly a lot of people will think, oh, well, it's the membership takes care of everything. I would imagine that's only a small part of what funds the operation.
So organizations like ours, I think there's, it gets people a little confusing because we have our PAC, we have our foundation, which is a C3, and then you have the chamber, which is a C6. A lot of times it gets blurred and they'll think that we're an extension of government, or, like, oh, you have people, it amazes me. They'll say, oh, Robert, you must have you have it easy. You got such a cush job as government. And I'm like, no, we're not government. We work very closely with government. We essentially, when we start a budget every year, we write a budget, and then there's a lot of hope and promise in that budget because we are relying on our past work and the future vision that we've set for your continued investment. Member dues is one facet where people are investing in a membership that provides them access or some benefits, but really we're focusing on what the results will be out of that investment. The other revenue streams are going to be in forms of, say, advertising or sponsorships, or event attendance and things when people have a nominal fee to attend a program or event. There are times that we may venture into some contractual type of work where we'll
Fee for
receive a
service type.
grant or something like that, and so it's a delicate balance. Just like any business, you sort of have to look at where your revenue is coming from, how to diversify that revenue, how to kind of manage that so that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. But at the core, we're a member-based organization.
Roughly, how many people do you employ?
So right now, between our full-time staff and then we have some contractual partners that have expertise in areas that we don't have on
Yep.
on staff, because again, we need those. Collectively, we're 20 employees.
Okay, and what's the budget roughly this year?
Between all three entities, Chamber Foundation and PAC, $7.7 million.
So no small budget. That's you are a significant business in town.
Absolutely.
And if I'm not mistaken, when you got here a couple years ago, we had a smaller membership,
We did.
and it is much larger today. Congratulations. We're pushing close to 2,000 maybe?
We are nearly 2,000 members. Our team is figuring out what that looks like and how to celebrate that milestone. But that shows momentum. That shows that business leaders, community partners are recognizing the true value of what we do, and that they see the leadership of our team, of our board, of our volunteers. And so that's what that represents to me. Is it's not just belonging and writing a check to join, like you said, a subscription or
Right.
things like that. This is about seeing value, because those dollars are harder to get today, right?
Totally
To
agreed.
earn that investment. Years ago, because I've done this for a while, it sort of felt like this is going to be easy. You've got to work at that. And
Mhm.
especially the larger dollar investors, everyone always thinks, oh, it's easy, to have XYZ company that has a bigger budget to invest. They look at their budgets and they're making tough decisions every single day, because the need for investment is all around us, whether it's in a chamber, whether it's in what they need to do to achieve their goals and mission, whether it's in our nonprofit sector of the economy, which is a vital engine driver for us. So, we have to be very intent and mindful of how we cultivate the conversation around driving our membership and business engagement.
I'm glad you mentioned nonprofit too, because they are members as well. They are businesses as well, and they should participate. They should engage.
Absolutely.
We are the Nonprofit Podcast Network. That's who we speak to. The majority of people are in the nonprofit space. The chamber has something to offer them as well. It's business, and that's what every nonprofit is. If they don't think they are, they're missing the boat.
That's fascinating, because over my years in the chamber world, sometimes when you speak of nonprofits in general, it was sort of like, oh, it's the poor little XYZ charity.
Exactly.
And, it's mission driven and it's pulling out a heartstring. And don't get me wrong, the work they do and with some of the funding gaps that happen to fill some of the social programs and all the things that we need, we cannot survive without the nonprofit community.
Correct.
They are businesses. And so over the years, we've seen, at least my observation is, nonprofits continuing to level up and run like a business.
Yes.
Right? They have to make sure that they're presenting themselves as a business, and yes, focus on the mission work, but they have to run like a business. So again, because we have access to such a wide network of industry professionals and leaders, we have a role to play in supporting them. I know there's some other organizations out there that really tailor and fine tune some resources for nonprofits, and that's great, because we need that, because that may not be something that we're providing. And that's where, when you talk about partnerships, it goes hand in glove. It takes the village. It takes all of us to do what we do to make this region thrive.
Agreed. And we know no money, no mission. If
100%.
you are not running it like a business, you are not going to survive. You're not sustainable. Let's have a little fun here for a second.
All right.
I mean, it's one of the questions we ask everybody. Money, no object.
Oof.
Some big business comes into town and says, Robert, I love the chamber. I'm giving you a blank check. What do you do with it?
Oh my gosh. That is an interesting question. And why I say that is, so in my background, before I went to the chamber world, I was in the casino industry. And I ran marketing and events. And so what was interesting is, yes, there were in theory budgets, but there really weren't. And so when I got to the chamber world the first time, and we had Pepto-Bismol pink filing cabinets, and my first desk drawer didn't even have a cover on the drawer, and my chair leaned too far to the one side. And, it's interesting that you asked that question, right? And so, look, if money were no object, part of what we would look to do is figure out how to scale up. There is so much more work that we can do, and as a region, we can collaborate on. But it takes people, the human capital. So it's figuring out how to leverage the human capital to take on more, intentional work. I think that's one. I think one, it's a dream come true for some of the chambers that have a space that fosters collaboration and creativity. Sometimes it's, we just need a space to house our people, and it's not fancy. We want to be mindful of member dollars, but I really believe chambers that have been visionary in creating models where they have some co-working space and they have the space that allows business to come in. Because if you're a home-based business or you're a small enterprise and maybe you have a nice little office, but it's only 2 offices or 3 offices, but you're trying to land your biggest client, how about host them at the chamber? How about have your meeting there and land your biggest client there? And you're talking about how you're affiliated with, the largest business organization in the region, right? And so some of those aspirations, I think, to be able to create, access to capital is tough. So, you hear a lot of businesses talk about that. I think that when there are situations that come up, figuring out how to build that out in collaboration with our community banks and those partners who work on that, you have opportunities where, sometimes just somebody has an idea and they need to believe. People want us to sponsor, and they think that, when you talked about our budget, it sounds large, but when you start parsing it down, it's a number and some zeros.
And it's some pass through too. Not all that's directly through.
You have to, and there's a lot of cost involved in that. And so I think having that, if we had a blank check, having some money set aside so that when somebody is working so hard, we would have the ability to throw a few dollars behind that to sort of be the incubator to help lift them up. So, there is so much you could do. It takes money, resources, but also realizing that, and this would be self-serving to me, and maybe it's who I am and how I was brought up. If somebody came to me and said, Robert, you said that, I'm going to write you a blank check, I would honestly say, look, let me tell you a couple priorities for me, but if that blank check can go a little bit further and a little bit wider, how do we tie in a couple other partners that could equally level up, that we all grow, right? So I would never want that to be wholeheartedly like, give me all us at the Metro Chamber. I think I'd rather say to the person, would you be creative with me and allow me to bring a few other partners in, because their work is predicated on my work and our work. And together we sort of are puzzle pieces that build the region. And maybe not everybody would do that because they might call me crazy, and maybe my board is like, what if that ever happened? But I think that that's how you lift it up. That's all boats rise. The tide rises, all boats rise.
Well, we ask that question so often because it gives the listener the ability to see your vision. And I think by incorporating other organizations, your board would applaud it. And they're going to get to hear this, so you're going to get to know.
Well, we'll see. We'll tell
right,
you, but,
right?
I think it's, you think of all the things that I don't want to say that we don't have the time for, but I don't have a dedicated person to lead that for us, because, there's tons of things out there we can do, whether it's a business boot camp or it's focusing on, how to develop the young professional even more. We have great programming, but there's always more you can do. It comes down to time, resources, and the talent to bring it forward.
Yes.
But ultimately that collaboration and finding some other people to bring into the mix, that'd be at the top of my list.
And something you said that really struck me. Let's say you're a fast-growing business. You don't have the wherewithal. You're not focused on your facility per se. But if you have a big account that you want to bring in, if you could bring it into that co-working space or that maker space, whatever that looks like, and they see you walking in, or they are walking into an association that's perceived with the Chamber of Commerce for your thriving business, budding business, oh, wow, something's a little bit, there's some credibility, there's some authority that, the Chamber lets him come in and do this, or lets her come in and do this?
Well, there's 2 things there. There's some national studies out there that will align and say that when a business is belonging to the local chamber, someone generally is 85% more likely to do business with them because that instant tag of credibility. You're investing in an enterprise and an organization, so you must be trustworthy. You must be at the top of your game in your business. You must be, a leader in whatever services you provide. So I think that's great. We're actually working on expansion now at our office so that we're growing. We're going to do 1 phase, but what I talked about, that second phase, that's something as we continue to grow. my vision is we will have that there at the Metro Chamber so that when you need a place to meet, we can provide that to you. Or again, we serve a 6-county region. If you are downtown, we're right on Capitol Mall, and your next meeting is 2-hour difference, sure, you might want to go to a local coffee shop or someone grab a quick bite, but maybe you don't have that luxury and you need to buckle down and make a few client calls. We want to make sure that we're seen as a destination that businesses can pop in, open up a laptop and get some work done.
Right.
And then who else pops in that they can have that kind of not forecasted thought of like, oh, I'm going to bump into Jeff today, right? And then what happens from there. So that's part 3 of our expansion phase that, again, as we grow some revenue and I can make sure that we can staff it and sustain it, I believe that is a value add for the region and for business.
Greatest need. What's the greatest need right now?
Ooh. I think it really depends on who you talk to, right? I mean, there's some general things that come, we're battling with so many different things, time, uncertainty, cost of healthcare, inflation. I mean, it depends on who you talk to on what the greatest need is. The challenge for an organization like the Chamber is we've got to be operating in so many different verticals to be successful. And so we also have to have the fortitude and empathy to understand the need that you or another business owner has may not be our top issue, but we need to make sure that you see you're heard, you're understood, and then we can sort of connect the dot to what we can do or what we can't do. Because at the end of the day, I don't ever want us to send false expectations. We're not the cure-all for everything. I don't have a magic wand. So when you talk about need, if you're talking to someone that's fighting to get their doors open or work through the bureaucracy of getting their certificate of occupancy, that's their greatest need.
Mm-hmm.
Although globally, when you think up higher, there's a lot of different needs. So that's a hard one to define because, again, it depends on the person, what page of the playbook they're on. We don't have the luxury as organizations say there's only one need. Now, we certainly understand the need to prioritize because you can't do everything all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So we certainly have to prioritize, kind of our primary focus, but we cannot discount that if someone reaches out to us, that their need is not important or it has no merit. It just may not be one of our top 4 or 5 priorities, but we still have to work to try to help them address that need.
As we get close to a wrap here, one of the questions that I like to ask everybody is, you have a lot of responsibility. You can't get away from what your job is because anywhere you go, there's business. You see business. Could that be a business? Could that be somebody we could benefit? It never stops. But somewhere there has to be relax and refresh. So what does Robert do to chill? What do you do for fun?
You talk about that because business is all around, right? And, I go places and people recognize me as the Chamber guy, so if I'm in the supermarket or I'm going places and someone's like, oh, hey, or you stop and you have a conversation. So you have to, I think, if you find what you're passionate about, we all work, but it's not necessarily work. Do I have my tough days? Do I have my 100%? But when it resonates with you and you find your niche, it doesn't feel like work. So I'm never bothered when I'm at dinner or I'm at different places and people want to talk Chamber. It's part of the fabric of who I am. It's in my DNA. You talk about that in the sense that I mentioned we have a foundation, a Chamber, and a PAC board. Collectively between those 3 boards, if they're all filled, it's about 130 bosses. So, imagine, you've got 130 people and then you have your team that because I work for them. Like really my job is to support lifting them up to be successful. And then our members, a non-member. So the pressure is high. The stakes are high. For me, it is when I can get home at a reasonable hour, unplug, relax, maybe have a nice dinner, go to the gym and try to focus on my health. Sometimes your circle of friends is very tight and small that are the people that you call and talk to and you sort of, lay out on the line,
Mm-hmm.
Having that access to those people that I can like, oh my gosh, today was one of those days. And it doesn't make it less than, like, you're not going to go back and you're not going to fight for business or whatever, but you don't win every day and you don't succeed every single day and you have your trip ups. And so you've got to find your tribe, so to speak, that you can call upon and you can, commiserate with and celebrate with and high five with, and they can sort of kick your butt and ground you, right? Because
Yeah, accountability is a bear.
accountability is a bear. And in this industry, sometimes people will let the ego get to them.
Yes.
Right. And that's not who I am. Right. Like, it's a shared spot. I tell our team all the time, our members and our partners are the stars of the show. And by virtue of my role as the president and CEO, I will be put into that spotlight at times. But our job is to be humble and remember who we are. So you have to find what you do. I read, but generally I read either early morning or late at night, and then the book will fall and hit me as I'm falling asleep. So you have to find those moments of levity for you. I love to get outdoors, so whenever I can get outdoors. I just got a new e-bike over the holidays. So I'm looking forward to taking a little bit more longer journeys because, pedaling sometimes gets a little tiresome, but good exercise. But I will say, when you're in a fast-paced role like this, you don't have a lot of downtime. So you have to find those moments. And you sometimes, it might only be 5 minutes. And then maybe you sort of stop, you're breathing, you're reflecting, you're taking a moment, because it's hard to say no. And there are calls I'll take at 7, 8 in the evening because it's the only time I can connect with that person. So the boundaries get blurred. And it's not a 9 to 5, and you have to be okay with that. So you have to know that you might only have 10 minutes to catch your breath today.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Right. But then tomorrow it might be a little bit more time block. So I think it comes down to how you integrate your life into what you do, because it's not just a 9 to 5 path.
Right. And when we love what we do, it's not work.
Absolutely.
So as a relative newcomer, I'm going to let you know, when you get that e-bike, we do have the bike trail, that's called. It's 32 miles from downtown to Folsom Lake. It's one of the best things you can do.
Have not done it, but it is on my list to do.
Right. To learn more, to join, to visit, to attend a mixer or a gala event, where does somebody go?
The easiest thing to do, pick up the phone, call us, send us a message.
Oh, you're inviting trouble right there.
Jeff, I will tell you, when we took our speaker series, the very first program, I threw my name, my phone number, and my email up on the screen. And the team was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I did. And I will tell you, every person got a personal response from me. That's who I am.
Good for you.
Right. And so if you want to reach out to us, there are people who know who we are. Our numbers are not secret. Our cell phones are not secret. Listen, we're here to serve a community, a subset of a region that, is thriving. We need to be accessible and accountable. So you can call, you can email, you can go to our website,
which is
metrochamber.org.
Okay. And we'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And your phone number.
Thank you. Perfect. And then anybody that knows us, right? So if someone says, "Oh, hey, Jeff, I want to learn a bit more about the chamber." Hey, I'm going to text Robert, or I'm going to shoot a message over to them. Yeah. Right? It's as easy as that. And then we're going to follow up. I met with a gentleman yesterday, and he said to me 3 times, he goes, I can't thank you enough for taking time to meet with me. That's my job. Mm-hmm. My job is to be entrenched in the communities we serve, talking to the businesses, hearing them out. Now, I can't meet with everyone. I would love to talk and sit down with everyone, but that's why I've got a dynamic team around me. So if I can't do it, they're going to be able to do it. But one way or another, we're here, we're ready to serve, and we're ready to take Sacramento and this region to the next level.
And that's why we're seeing membership approaching 2,000. That's exactly why. Robert, thank you for joining me, helping me clarify how our esteemed Sacramento Metro Chamber functions within and strengthens Sacramento's business community. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for all your team does. Thank you for all the time and the commitment and the energy that's going into helping make this a better economic city in terms of its vitality, in terms of the businesses that we bring, and the collaboration that you've got with the organizations that you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you. We are unstoppable as a region.
And before we leave, what I want to do is, I have never seen anybody take more selfies in more situations. So we're going to do one right here for everybody.
All right.
And I'm going to have my long arm out for a social.
All right. Perfect.
Robert, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. We hope today's episode inspired you and gave you a deeper look into the work of our local nonprofits. If you believe in our mission to amplify their voices, Please take a moment to leave us a positive review and share this episode with a friend. It helps more people discover the incredible work happening in our community. And don't miss future episodes. Subscribe to our weekly updates and monthly newsletter at nonprofpod.com. And if you're part of a nonprofit that would like to be featured, we'd love to hear from you. Just visit the Guests tab on our website. The Nonprofit Podcast Network is recorded and produced at Hear Me Now Studio with generous support from our outstanding partners. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations, online at captrust.com. Western Health Advantage, local care with community impact. Find the plan that fits at westernhealth.com. CORE, executive leadership and comprehensive support services. Visit cxore.com. And 5 Star Bank, a local trusted advisor to community nonprofits for over 25 years. 5starbank.com.